Alright, today we are doing 8.5 day 3. Our objective today will be to write an equation of a line given 2 points. To warm up, we will review what we did at the end of last week. Write the slope-intercept form of the equation of the line through the given point with the given slope. So you might remember that to do these we started out in point-slope form. And then we changed it into slope-intercept form. So point-slope form was y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. That's what we started out in. And then we changed it to be slope-intercept, which was y equals mx plus b. So that's what we're going to do on these warm-ups. First, we're going to put it into point-slope form. Then we're going to change it to slope-intercept form. Who can tell me what my point-slope form is going to be for number 1? We've got a point. We've got a slope. We just got to plug it in. Keon? It's hard for me to hear over that heater, but I'm hoping you said y minus 3 equals 4 times x minus 2. Oh, good. Alright, so we plugged in our m, and we also plugged in our y1 and our x1. After we put it into point-slope form, in order to get it into slope-intercept form, we first had to distribute. Tariana, what do I get when I distribute? 4x minus 8. So yes, when we distribute, the y minus 3 stays the same. We just distribute the 4 into those parentheses to get 4x minus 8. The last thing we have to do to get this into slope-intercept form is get y by itself. Who can tell me how to do that? Danielle? Add 3 to both sides. Y equals 4x. What is negative 8 plus 3? Everyone should be able to answer that. Negative 5. So y equals 4x minus 5. You will have questions like that on your quiz tomorrow, so you need to remember those steps. Point-slope form, distribute, get y by itself. Alright, on warm-up number 2, we're back to the beginning. We got to put it in point-slope form. Do I have any new volunteers to help me with that? Natalie.
Y minus 6 equals 2/3, open parentheses, x minus 0.
We're very close on that. The only thing I added to what you said was that we were subtracting a negative 6. The only thing I added to what Natalie said was that we are subtracting a negative 6 because our y1 is negative. When we subtract a negative, what's really happening? We're adding a positive. So this will change to y plus 6 equals 2/3. What is x minus 0 going to be? Not 0. It's just x. X minus 0 is just x. So we can kind of eliminate those parentheses because all that's going to be there is an x. So that means we don't really have to distribute. If we did distribute, we would still just have 2/3 x minus 0. We don't need to put minus 0 on the back of that. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. So our last step is still to get y by itself. Any new volunteers to tell me how that would happen here? Deja? Subtract 6 from both sides. It's a little hard to see up there. So when we do that, we're just subtracting 6 off of the end of the 2/3 x. So I will write the answer up towards the top. We just have y equals 2/3 x minus 6. There was nothing to combine with the minus 6 because we didn't rewrite the 0. So that's our answer. Now we will be given 2 points. Our goal is still to write the equation of a line in slope-intercept form. So in order to do this, we are going to first find the slope using our slope formula, which was y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Or if you prefer to put the y1 and the x1 first, you can. If you want to switch where the 1's and 2's are, that's okay. We cannot switch where the y's and x's are. So we're going to find slope. We will choose one of the 2 points that they give us. We'll use the point and slope to put the equation in point-slope form. And then we will transform the equation into slope-intercept form. So we are going to use those steps on all of these examples. Step 1 is going to be to find the slope. We have to use both points in order to find the slope. If you need to label your points as x1, y1, and x2, y2, go ahead and do that. Finding slope is something we've been doing for almost all of chapter 8. Our slope, where m equals y2, which is 5, minus y1, which is negative 3, over x2, which is 0, minus x1, which is 4. This is something that I'm expecting you to be able to do. It's something we've already learned, already been tested over. 5 minus negative 3 is a positive 8. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. What is 8 divided by negative 4? Negative 2. As soon as you find your slope, this turns into a problem like we did on Friday. Now you have a slope, you have to pick one of the 2 points. It does not matter which one you pick, your answer in the end should be the same either way. So which point do we want to use? What? The first one? 4 and negative 3? It doesn't matter to me. If that's one we want to use, that's one we'll go with. So now we have m, and we have an x and a y, and we are going to plug it into point-slope form. Y, what would come after the y in point-slope form if we're using this point? Jaquan? Minus negative 3, which is really plus 3, equals, my slope is negative 2, and in the parentheses we would have, Jaquan? X minus 4. From here, we're going back to our steps from Friday. We're trying to get it into slope-intercept form, so we are going to distribute. When we distribute that negative 2, what do we get? Negative 2x. What else? Negative 2 times negative 4 is? Positive or negative? positive, so we would put plus 8. And then we still have to get y by itself. How are we going to do that? Subtract. Subtract the 3 on both sides. When we subtract 3 on both sides, we are left with y equals negative 2x plus 5. And that is in slope-intercept form, so we are finished. First thing I got to do is find my slope. Any volunteers to tell me what they want plugged into my numerator and denominator? People I have not heard from yet today. Should be most people. May, are you raising your hand? Okay. Very good. Negative 5 plus 4 in our numerator, 0 minus 4 in the denominator. What is negative 5 plus 4? Negative 1, and 0 minus 4 is negative 4. How would this simplify? They would both be positive. Positive 1 over positive 4. So that is the slope that I will use. Next, we have to put it into point slope form using one of the 2 points. Which point do we want to work with? Okay. We'll work with the first point. Any new volunteers to tell me what my point slope form would be? Jalen, why don't you help us out with our point slope form? Point slope form.
Y minus negative 4. And over 4. Times x minus 4.
Wonderful. Our point slope form would be y minus negative 4 equals 1/4 x minus 4. Here, instead of writing minus and negative, what would I normally like? Just using addition. So y plus 4 equals, why don't we go ahead and distribute while we're here? 1/4 times x is just 1/4 x. Can anyone tell me what 1/4 of 4 is? 1. Okay, so we simplified it and distributed all in the same step. Carl? Good. Our last step is to get y by itself. So we subtract 4 from both sides. We have y equals 1/4 x minus 5. Very good. On example 3, we first had to find our slope. Keon, how did you find your slope?
I did 0 plus 4 and negative 3 plus 0.
So what did you get for your slope?
4 and negative 3.
I would agree with that slope. Carl, which point did you work with? Good, so you worked with that first point, and then we put it in point slope form. I would agree with that. The next thing we have to do is distribute. Ryan, what do we get if we distribute? So first we're going to distribute, so the y plus 4 is going to stay the same. What's negative 4/3 times x? Okay, and what's negative 4/3 times 0?
Just stays the same.
Okay, so we can put a plus 0 on the end if we want to, but we don't have to. I think that putting it there helps some people see what happens next. But if you know what to do next without the plus 0, that's fine. You don't have to have it there. The last step is to get y by itself. Nevaeh, how would I do that? How would I get this y by itself?
Oh, you just divide it? Like put a y over y?
We're not going to divide it. Right now we're adding to it. How do we undo?
Subtract it.
Okay, so we subtract what?
Y, you subtract the y.
So we're going to leave the y alone.
No, yes.
So we're going to subtract the 4. We do it to both sides.
Yes.
So we're left with y equals negative 4/3 x. What is 0 minus 4? Negative 4. So minus 4. And that is our slope-intercept form. Questions on example 3? Even if you had decided to use the other point, the negative 3 comma 0, some of your work would have looked a little different, but your answer should have come out the same. All right, let's go on to example 4. Tariana, can you tell me how you set up to find your slope?
I did m equals 2 plus 3. And then at the bottom, I did negative 2 minus 3.
Very good. And what did you get for your slope?
I got 5 over negative 5, negative 1.
Very good. We should have gotten a slope of negative 1. Even if you set it up a little differently, we should still end up with the same slope. Deja, what did you get when you put it into point slope form? Very good. So on our next line, to simplify it, we'll simplify and distribute. So subtracting a negative means we're really adding a positive. Jeriel, what do we get when we distribute that negative 1?
What?
We're distributing this negative 1 into the parentheses, so what would we get?
Would it be negative x
Mm-hmm.
and positive 4? I think.
Close. What's 1 times 3?
Oh. Positive 3.
Very good. So we would have y plus 3 equals negative x plus 3. Houston, what's my last step? Subtract 3 from both sides. So that leaves me with y equals what, Houston? So negative x, what is 3 minus 3? 0. Do I need to put plus 0? Nope, so I can just leave it there. If you put the plus 0, it's not wrong. If you put a 1 in front of the x, like a negative 1, that's also okay. But usually we would just see it written y equals negative x. Questions on that one? All right, let's keep going. On example 5, Shannon, how would I set up to find my slope?
M is 1 plus 4.
I think it should be minus, right? 1 minus 4. Okay.
Alright. It's negative 4 plus 2.
Minus 2.
Minus
Yes. We only change it to plus if we're subtracting a negative. Okay.
2. Alright.
What's 1 minus 4?
3.
Positive or negative? Negative 3 over
6.
positive or negative? Try again. Negative 6. Alright, a negative over a negative is going to reduce to be a positive. 3 over 6 reduces to be 1 over 2. So we should use a positive 1/2 as our slope. Alright, so then we got to set up our point slope form. Lexi, what is our point slope form? Okay. Instead of putting minus a negative, I'm going to just go ahead and put a positive. Next, we need to distribute. Danielle, what do I get when I distribute?
Half x plus 2.
Very good. Y minus 1 equals 1/2 x plus 2. Last step is to get y by itself. Jamal Dixon, how would I do that? So right now we are subtracting, so we're going to add 1 to both sides. So what do we get, Jamal? Wonderful. On number 6, first thing we need is our slope. Kyan, how would I set up to find my slope?
Negative 5 minus 1. Negative 3 minus 1.
Very good. In our numerator, we would have negative 5 minus 1, denominator negative 3 minus 5. What is negative 5 minus 1, Kyan? Negative 6, good. And negative 3 minus 5? Negative 8. A negative over a negative will simplify to a positive. 6 over 8 simplifies to be 3 over 4. Very good. We've got our slope. Now we need to pick a point and put it in point slope form. Kelby, what is our point slope form? Very good. Y minus 1 equals 3/4 x minus 5. So now we have to distribute, and this is where it gets just a little uglier than we're used to. 3/4 x, that's fine, we're used to that. If we're taking a positive 3/4 times a negative 5, positive times a negative is a negative. This goes back to some of the problems we did on Friday. We had to take 3/4 times, we put the 5 over a 1. Will anything cross cancel? No. So what's 3 times 5? And what's 4 times 1? Okay, so we're just left with 15 over 4. It's not great, but it's not awful. We can handle that. The next thing we have to do is get y by itself. Jamarl, how would we get y by itself? Add the 1 to both sides. The only issue here is that these do not have the same denominator. So instead of putting a 1 over 1, how can I change that to have a denominator of a 4? You gotta get a common denominator, Ellie. We multiplied by 4, so 1 times 4 is 4, and then in the top, 1 times 4 is also 4. So instead of adding a positive 1 over 1, we're going to add 4 over 4 because that's the same thing with a common denominator. Our 15 is negative. So what is negative 15 plus 4? Negative 11. And our denominator is going to stay 4. So we go back down here. Y equals 3/4 x minus 11/4. Oh, I kind of wrote it down at the bottom where it's a little hard to see. Let me write it on the side here. I'll write it up top. If you can't see it at the bottom, this is the answer to number 6. Questions on example 6? Alright, we'll see how far we can get on these. We'll try to get them done. We might be able to. Let's see. May, what did you do to set up your slope on number 7? And what did you get when you did that? And that simplified to be a positive 1. Very good. So we've got our slope. Next, we need point slope form. Ellie, what did you get for point slope form? Okay. So what's my point slope form going to be? Very good. When we distribute a 1, is it going to change anything? Will multiplying by 1 change x or the minus 2? No. So this is just going to be x minus 2 when we distribute. Our last step is to get y by itself. Jaquan, how would I do that? Add 5 to both sides. So we get y equals x. What's negative 2 plus 5? Positive or negative 3? Positive 3, so we put plus 3. Alright, on example 8. Jakeem, how would I set up to find my slope? And what would go in the denominator? Okay, what is negative 2 minus 4? Negative 6. And 4 minus 1 is, what is that simplified to? Whoop, our bigger number's on top. Negative 6 divided by 3. Positive or negative? Negative 2. Alright, so our slope is negative 2. We need point slope form. Connie, what would we get for point slope form? Alright, let's do it now. Which point do you want to work with? Okay, so for point slope form, we need y minus the y coordinate. What's the y coordinate? 4. Equals, what's our slope? What did we just say our slope was over here?
2.
Negative 2. And then our parentheses, we want x minus the x coordinate. What's the x coordinate? 1. Delaney, what do we get when we distribute? Wonderful. Last step is to get y by itself. Logan, how would I do that? Add 4 to both sides. What do we get when we add 4? Yeah. Wonderful.